There is a kind of pain that doesn't leave a bruise. It doesn't have a story you can point to. No single moment. No dramatic scene. Just a slow, quiet absence, like growing up in a house where the lights were always slightly dimmed. You learned, very early, that your feelings were too much, or not enough, or simply not welcome. Maybe your parents were there, physically, but something you still can't fully name was always missing. And maybe you grew up telling yourself it wasn't that bad. If you've ever felt strangely lonely even when surrounded by people, if love feels like a trap more than a comfort, then what I'm about to share may finally give language to something you've been carrying for years. These are the 5 painful truths about growing up without love. They are painful, not because they're cruel, but because they are real. Some truths hurt because they fit. If you secretly feel like you're too much and not enough at the exact same time, you are not alone. You are not broken. You are someone who grew up without a map, and you have been navigating in the dark ever since. Watch slowly. Some of what you're about to hear may put words to feelings you've carried for years. Real things, once named, begin to lose their power to stay hidden. This is not a story about blame. It is a story about recognition. Most people, when they hear the word trauma, picture something dramatic. An event, a moment, something terrible that happened. But there's another kind of wound, a quieter one. And it comes not from what happened to you, but from what never happened at all. No one held you when you cried and said, "I see you. I understand. You're safe." No one asked how you were feeling and actually waited for the answer. No one noticed when you went quiet. This is what psychologists call childhood emotional neglect. And unlike abuse, which leaves visible marks, emotional neglect is invisible. It's the consistent failure of a caregiver to respond to a child's emotional world. Not necessarily with cruelty, sometimes with busyness, sometimes with their own pain, sometimes with silence that was never meant to wound, but did, deeply. The absence was real, even if no one ever called it that. Here's what makes this so hard to recognize. Children who grow up this way often don't feel like victims. They feel like they're fine. They feel like they should be grateful. After all, nothing bad happened. But here's what I want you to understand. A child who is never seen emotionally doesn't think, "My parents failed me." A child thinks, "There must be something wrong with me." That thought becomes a belief. That belief becomes a life. You spend years shrinking yourself, over-explaining yourself, apologizing for your needs. Because somewhere inside, you're still that child who concluded their inner world was a burden. Because if you've ever felt like your emotions were too heavy for other people, like needing things was somehow shameful, this is where that feeling was born. Not in your weakness, in your survival. People will call you strong, self-sufficient, admirable, and you will smile, and you will believe it. Because the alternative, admitting that you cannot let people in, is far more terrifying than any compliment. Hyper-independence. It sounds like a strength, and in certain ways, it is. You get things done. You don't burden people. You show up. You handle it. Whatever it is. But here is the truth underneath that. You became this way because you had to. When you were young, you reached for someone, emotionally, maybe even physically, and they weren't there. Not fully. Or they were there, but couldn't meet you. So you learned the most devastating lesson a child can learn. Needing people is dangerous. Your nervous system took notes. It built walls. And over time, those walls became your identity. I don't need anyone. I prefer to be alone. I'm just not that emotional. But what if I told you that your fierce self-reliance isn't who you are? What if it's a response to who you had to become? The wall was never your identity. It was your shelter. Children who grow up with emotionally unavailable caregivers often develop what's called a dismissive avoidant attachment style. They learn to suppress their needs, to deactivate their emotional system, to see vulnerability as weakness rather than connection. And it works. For a while. Until you fall in love. Until a friendship deepens. Until someone gets close enough. That the wall starts to feel less like protection and more like a prison. The part of you that refuses to ask for help is not your strength. It's the child in you who stopped asking, because asking hurt too much. Your real strength is what you'll find on the other side of that wall. This one is harder to admit. If you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where affection was earned through behavior, through achievement, then you learn something that most people never examine. You learn that love is a performance. You became excellent at reading the room, at knowing what people needed before they asked, at being whatever version of yourself kept the peace. got the approval, made things comfortable for everyone else. Therapists call this people-pleasing, but that term is too soft for what it really is. What it really is survival. You didn't become agreeable because you're weak. You became agreeable because being yourself wasn't safe. When you spend your childhood performing love instead of receiving it, you arrive in adulthood with an incredible ability to give and a terrifying inability to receive. Someone loves you genuinely. No conditions, no catch, and it feels wrong. Like they must not really know you. Because the version of you they love, the real, unedited, unperforming version, never felt worthy of love to begin with. So you keep performing. You over-explain. You overgive. You preemptively apologize. You make yourself smaller, or more impressive, or more whatever you think they need. Because the moment you stop performing, you're terrified there will be nothing left worth loving. This is the legacy of conditional love. Not that you can't love, but that you can't quite believe you deserve to be loved back. For free, just as you are. There's a very particular kind of loneliness that no one talks about. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being in a room full of people who love you, and still feeling completely, utterly unreachable. If you know this feeling, it's not a mystery. It's a wound. When you grow up in an environment where emotional connection is absent, your nervous system doesn't just learn to live without it. It learns to distrust it. Connection begins to feel dangerous. Intimacy feels like exposure. Because the last time you were fully open, the last time you let someone see the tender, unprotected parts of you, it didn't go the way it was supposed to. So you adapted. You built a life that looks connected. Friends, relationships, conversations. But behind every interaction, there's a wall. Thin enough to be warm, thick enough to be safe. And you mistake this for preference. You tell yourself you like your space. You tell yourself you're introverted. You tell yourself you're independent. But late at night, when the noise stops, there it is. That ache. That strange, hollow ache of a person who has forgotten what it feels like to be truly known. People who experienced emotional neglect in childhood carry a fundamental belief, often completely unconscious, that they are somehow too much or not enough for genuine closeness. They feel, at their core, that if someone truly saw them, all of them, they would ultimately be abandoned. So they stay half visible, present enough to feel connected, hidden enough to feel safe. And years go by, and the loneliness deepens. Not because no one is there, but because you've never fully let anyone in. That child, the one who learned to go quiet, to need less, to take up less space, was doing the only thing they knew how to do. They were protecting a heart already bruised by absence. This may be the most painful truth of all. Childhood emotional neglect doesn't always leave you with dramatic memories. It doesn't always give you a story to tell. What it gives you instead is a feeling. A persistent, low-grade feeling that something is off. That you are off. That other people seem to move through the world with an ease and a lightness that you cannot quite access. You might call it anxiety, or numbness, or the sense that no matter what you achieve, no matter who loves you, there's a gap. A hollow space inside that nothing quite fills. Psychologists describe this as the emotional emptiness that comes from a lifetime of walling off your feelings. Because when you grow up in an environment where emotions were unwelcome, where your sadness was dismissed, your anger was punished, your needs were inconvenient, you learn to bury them. And here's the brutal irony. You cannot selectively bury feelings. When you wall off the pain, you also wall off the joy. When you numb the grief, you also numb the love. You arrive in adulthood functional, capable, and quietly unreachable, even to yourself. You look at others who cry easily, who laugh freely, who say I love you without calculating the risk, and you wonder what is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Something was simply missing, for a long time, and your brilliant, adaptive mind found a way to survive without it. But survival was never meant to be the whole story. The numbness that protected you then is the same wall keeping you out of your own life now. And the first step is not fixing it. The first step is simply seeing it. I want to end not with more pain, but with something true and something hopeful. What happened to you was not your fault. The walls you built were not failures. They were solutions, elegant, necessary solutions to a problem a child should never have had to solve alone. But here's what I know. Naming something changes it. The moment you can say, I grew up without the emotional support I needed, and it shaped how I love and how I live. You are no longer a prisoner of it. You are someone who understands it. And understanding is always the first step towards something different. Healing doesn't mean going back and fixing the childhood you deserved. You can't do that. No one can. But you can begin to do for yourself what was never done for you. You can learn to sit with your feelings instead of silencing them. You can learn to ask for help without shame. You can learn that your needs are not a burden. They are just needs. Human ones. The kind every person has. The child who learned to survive without tenderness is still inside you. Still waiting. Not to be fixed, but to be seen. And maybe that is where it begins. With you, looking inward, and finally, gently, saying, I see you. You were never the problem. And it is never too late to come home to yourself. If this put words to something you've been carrying quietly, share it with someone who might need to hear it too.
Like to learn more about human psychology? Like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe my channel now. Thank you for watching.